Whether it be my story or my guest stories, we all share parts of the human experience. In our own ways, we have all faced triumph and challenges, both joy and pain, both gratitude and grief. My life changed forever on October 11, 2019, the day I had a stroke. It had a ripple effect, not only for me, but also for those I cherish. Through grace, we are here today to pay it forward. It's my mission to focus on what brings us together and help people find their path through life stories. By age 13, Ben had started experimenting with mind-altering drugs. By 17, he had developed a debilitating drug problem. Now, coming full circle, Ben is a youth recovery advocate and the program director of Full Circle. Welcome, Ben. I always say everybody has a story, and you have a lot of stories. So you run an organization called Full Circle.
Correct.
Okay. Tell me what Full Circle does.
So Full Circle, the kind of technical term for the model is it's a 12-step based enthusiastic approach alternative peer support group or recovery community organization is the new fancy term for what it technically is. But the 12-step aspect of the program is we actually got permission from Alcoholics Anonymous World Services to change the steps and gear them more towards young people and adolescents, because getting sober at a younger age is just different, and it's not an addict alcoholic program by any means. A lot of the times those terms can be very overwhelming, and young people interpret them as I have to be at a certain point to be able to change. Because a lot of the time that's how people view it, right? If I'm not doing opiates, if I'm not, living behind a dumpster, I don't have a problem. Which is a pretty large gap, right? And so for young people, we basically tried to raise the bottom a little bit where they can actually get to a place where they go, okay, my life isn't the way that I want it to be.
Okay, so stop.
Yes.
How did you start this?
No. So I started Denver Full Circle, yes. But the enthusiastic recovery philosophy has been around since, I want to say 1970 something, but got really muddled up somewhere in there. And then basically in 2010, Father John Bonavita, who is a Roman Catholic priest and became a priest to avoid the Italian mob.
That's a great story.
Oh yeah, if you ever want to talk to him, he is wild. So
I do.
You should. He's incredible. But he basically sat down with a family and they asked him if there was anything that he could do to help their son. 17-year-old boy struggling with alcohol. If you asked him if he had a problem, he'd tell you no. Because of course, right? He'd go, I'm 17, what are you talking about? This is what all 17-year-olds do. And unfortunately, about a week later, that young man passed away. He drowned at a park because he decided to get into the lake, but he was intoxicated and could not support his own weight in the water. So after that, Father John basically, for lack of a better way of saying it, snapped, right? And went, we have to do something. And stumbled across the enthusiastic kind of recovery philosophy and altered it to be more of what you see Full Circle today. But originally, it was just this little rinky-dink idea. I mean, it really was. It was 5 to 10 moms in a room with a Roman Catholic priest talking about how do we help our kids, right? And then they start pushing him and going, we need to bring our kids. Our kids need to meet each other so that they can support each other. And finally, kind of begrudgingly, he agrees to do so. And then in the last 10 to 12 years, the model has gotten much more solidified and become much more than a very small idea. So, but the odd thing about it, and I think kind of one of the coolest things about Full Circle, is it was founded as a ministry of the Roman Catholic Church, but you don't got to be Catholic. I run the one here in Denver. I'm not Catholic. I told Father John that the day he asked me to work for him, and I told him I wouldn't become that. And and this is a direct quote, but generally speaking, it was, it's about helping people save their own ass, not their soul.
Well said.
Which I thought was
Yeah,
which I thought was kind of cute and really perfect to as far as young people go, because if it's just about that, you kind of lose a lot and you end up cutting off half of the world. So we have kids from every religious, spiritual background there is. I have a kid whose higher power is the flying spaghetti monster, but it works for him. So
Okay.
as long as it works.
Okay, so why you?
Why me? Bluntly,
Yes.
I left to my own devices. By the time I was 17, I basically cut every member of my family out of my life. I'd become, to some degree, a black sheep in my community. I was a bit infamous because Augusta, Georgia is a much smaller town than Denver, so everybody knows everybody, about 300,000 people.
Where did you hide?
All over the place and kind of in plain sight.
Oh.
That was partially the issue. So the best way to describe it would be I was using lots of Xanax, smoking lots of marijuana, hanging out with people that I probably shouldn't have. And, you know, my parents are still together, had a glass of wine at dinner on Fridays. Very normal people. And for whatever reason, when I smoked pot the first time, and I absolutely fell in love with it, right? I was like, everyone that's ever told me drugs are bad is totally lying, right? They just never done them, right? So that's really the problem. If more people did drugs, they would understand why this is the best thing on the planet, right?
Yeah.
And so as I started to do that more and more, what happened is the same thing that happens with most teenagers, right? You smoke pot a couple times, and prior to that, growing up, the things you don't tell your family, or the things you lie to your family about, is, oh no, Mom, I brushed my teeth. I really did. I didn't pee on the toilet seat. I totally did my homework. Those are the things that you lie to your family about. But the day you start using some sort of mind-altering substance, or participating really in any of the behaviors we talk about at Full Circle, it's this whole world you're not going to tell your family about. But now if it starts to become more and more of your world, half my life, my whole life, it's my whole life. My family knew nothing about. Right, so fast forward 2.5, 3 years in, and if you were to ask my mother, she would say she was living with a stranger.
Wow.
Because I was just very different. I was incredibly angry, putting my head through walls, putting my fist through walls.
And she didn't know?
No, she knew, but she couldn't figure out what was wrong. Right, she'd give me a drug test, and for anyone that doesn't know this, you can pass a drug test. It's not that difficult. I've taken over 250 of them. Failed one because I wanted to.
Wow.
But so she ends up feeling crazy, right? And then she's asking me what's going on, and I go, nothing, Mom, you're crazy. Right?
Her mother.
That's my poor mother, yes. And same for my father. He had no idea what was going on, right? And they have no experience with this because they've never been in that situation, and there's no rule book, right? When you become a parent, I don't think anyone goes, and here's how to be a probation officer. Like, that's not.
Yeah. You have
part of it.
Siblings?
Yes, I have 2 younger brothers, Thomas and Daniel.
Okay.
So
do as I say, or not do as I do?
Do as I do as I say. I was a tyrant in my home.
Wow.
Would be the way that I would describe it. So I was not fun to live with. My brothers would cut my face out of yearbooks, say they had different last names. Because, you know, my middle brother's experience was he got into high school and one of the teachers said, "Oh, you're Ben Stincer's brother. Could you please change classes?"
Oh my God, really?
Oh, yeah. My young brother got in trouble, or my middle brother also got in trouble at some point, and the argument that the lawyer used on the other side against my brother was that he was my brother, and against my mother. So, which had nothing to do with anything that they had ever done.
But did you know that at that time?
Nope. And honestly, if you'd have told me, I wouldn't have cared.
So, when did you start caring?
Well, it was...
One day.
It was one day, but it was an array of days. I did a whole thing. So when I was 17, at this point, I had gotten everything that I wanted. Right? I wanted to not be able to be hurt, and I wanted people to basically be at this distance. Right? I didn't want you to know what was going on with me, because that in my head meant that you could hurt me, and I didn't want that. But the best way I could describe the feeling would be is it felt as if there was a hole in my chest that the wind could blow through. And I could fit in with anybody, talk to anybody, but I never felt like I connected with anyone. And I can remember feeling that way since I was a little kid.
Okay. Who hurt you to make you feel that way?
That's what's funny. Nobody did.
The boogeyman, yeah?
Fully. And you know, I moved when I was 11 years old, so that was, you know, it's up there as far as trauma. But it was strange because when I look back at that time period, you know, the move didn't really affect me. It was mostly, I got into high school, right? And being a teenager is basically living with a low-grade fever of insecurity 24/7, 365, right? And you don't know what to do with your hands or your feet or your head, and you're figuring out how to walk and talk and communicate. And when I was in 7th grade, I got asked, hey, have you ever smoked pot before? Right? And there's a pretty girl standing right over here. So my immediate answer, of course, is, oh, all the time. All the time. Of course I do, to making sure she, you know, she hears what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, I tried it and I totally fell in love with it. But then it gave me everything I ever wanted. I wasn't insecure anymore. I could talk to girls. I instantly became cool at school overnight. Right? And then I started to change the way I dress and tailor it more to that lifestyle and try and look the part and be the part.
You were the man.
Yes, that's what I wanted to be. I wanted everyone to know who I was. And I accomplished that goal and still felt that exact same hole in my chest. It didn't do anything. It goes away as long as you're high, and then as soon as you're not. It's the most empty feeling I've ever experienced. I think that there's a difference between being alone and then feeling alone and then realizing that your feeling is actually your reality.
Wow.
That it's not just a feeling. It's really where you're at. You've made yourself ultimately alone.
Okay, so you have this hole in your heart. You're pushing people, not pushing people away, but pushing people away?
Yes, and sometimes really pushing people away, especially the people that I knew cared.
Okay, so your mother and father are...
trying to get me to go to therapy, trying to get me to see a psychiatrist, trying to get me to go to some form of treatment, trying to get anything that they could. And every therapist I talked to, one of two things would happen. They'd ask me, so why are you doing it? As a 17-year-old young man, I really liked poking at people. And so I would say things like, why are you doing therapy? Right? Yeah. And just play with it. Because, but I wasn't going to actually do anything because I wasn't going to incriminate myself with my parents. I wasn't going to tell this guy that, you know, like, oh, he's not going to tell my parents. Totally. Right. If I tell you that I eat Xanax like it's candy, you're going to go and tell my mom. So I'm not telling you anything. But really, I didn't want to have a conversation with him because honestly, the feeling that I had at that point in time is you think that you know me because you read a book. Yeah. But you don't. And if I was to bring it back to one particular experience, right in the beginning of me starting to smoke marijuana and participate in that lifestyle, right? I started to experience what that lifestyle really brings. And yeah, I went to some parties, hung out with some college kids, and it was, it was like a movie, right? And then it became all too real. One of my young friends, he was 15 at the time, took some Xanax. And I had left, and his parents would go out of town for the weekend because they had they would just, something with work, I actually can't fully remember. But his cousin, who was 22 and in a fraternity, his name was Trip, he would throw parties there every weekend because it's this very nice house in a very nice gated community, and nobody ever said anything. So there'd be, 30, 40 college kids there. And one night after that had all wound down, we had watched some movie that had given us this idea. I can't fully remember how it happened, but I just remember the phone call. But my friend had lost playing a game of Russian roulette and shot himself in the back.
Oh my God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we used to prank call the police. So when they called, they didn't think it was real at first. So by no fault of them, because they would get a call, and legitimately probably 5 times a week, we would call and make up some ridiculous story. So, and it was the same number. So they thought it was the same thing. but it actually wasn't. So he ended up passing away. And that was when, I was about 15 years old. Got that phone call from this girl that I was seeing at that point in time who was driving around the neighborhood on a golf cart. Said there's a bunch of police at this house. And then my friend called me crying and walked me through it. And I was the strangest feeling I think I've ever experienced. Because I expect myself to feel a certain way, but I've never felt more numb. Just immediately.
So that was the turning point? Yeah.
The beginning of a day.
Yeah.
For sure. But it was odd because it set me up to kind of go, well, that's going to happen. So why do anything? And it was weird because I would go in and out of suicidal ideation and in and out of like, well, if I die, I die. Whatever. And I'm 15. Okay, so
makes a lot of sense to you.
Yes. So and really got to a place with that where I went, well, I'm gonna burn bright and burn out. I guess we'll see what happens. And so I started using more and more and more and more. But even at that point, I didn't see it as a problem at all.
Were you functioning?
Oh yeah, I could go to school. School was very easy for me, and I could pass my classes, whatever. But then what happened is I started to think I was going to school, and I wouldn't go. I'd actually go missing for weeks on end. But I don't actually remember doing that. That's what's very strange about my story. Yeah, I would go missing for a couple weeks. My parents wouldn't know where I was. They'd try and find me, hire the police. One time they found me in a park. I don't know what I was doing in the park. I don't remember. I just remember seeing my mom and being like, "Hey, Mom," like it was normal.
Oh my!
And she's sobbing, and I'm like, "Why are you crying? This is weird. You've made it odd. Just saying hi. Why are you?"
Would you come home after a week?
Yeah.
Like, hey, I'm home.
Yeah, but I was just so numb. I mean, I really didn't. It didn't register.
Wow.
No matter what they said or did, it didn't. It did not register to me, and so. The kind of punchline to that whole event is when I was 17, I got arrested for false statements to investigator, theft by taking, grand larceny, a couple other misdemeanors mixed in with those.
What did you do?
So it's interesting. I actually didn't do.
Oh, wow.
but in their defense, they had been trying to, I think, arrest me for some time. Because in my high school and just in my community, kind of everybody knew, don't hang out with this kid, right? And my mom would get phone calls about, other mothers, other families going, your son's hanging out with my son. And my mom would go, keep your son away from my son. Do not let him near my son. And I went to this young woman's house, and she was throwing a party. And she called me to ask me how much some of the prescription medication was worth that she had. So of course, naturally, I show up over there, and it was what felt like a scene from a movie, right? I opened up the cabinet and it was like white light shined, and I heard like holy music. I mean, it was the greatest day, right? Because it was every prescription medication you can think of.
Bingo!
Yes, immediately. So of course I turned to her and I go, they're about 25 cents a piece, which dramatic understatement.
Making a deal, right?
Yes. And so I tell her I'll buy all of them from you right now. She says, well, if they're not worth anything, I'll just give them out for free. So they happen to be Oxycontin and Xanax.
Wow.
So she decides to give them out for free. So of course I tell everyone. And her house goes from a lovely get together of 5 people to probably 80 in a couple hours. And as people walk in the door, she's just handing it to them.
Gift with purchase.
Literally. And I don't remember very much of what happened there, but what I would do is I had these other young people that basically we would go to parties, we would go to people's houses, and then when everybody got drunk or it was intoxicated enough, we would go upstairs and go through the clothes and go through the jewelry and go through the silverware and take what we wanted.
Whoa.
And then either go pawn it or sell it or do whatever so that we could continue to just do kind of whatever we wanted. So, the most money I ever had in my entire life was when I was 17.
How much?
At that point, around between $10,000 to $15,000 at that point,
God.
like at any one given moment, just in my hand, right?
You were the man.
Kind of, from one perspective, yes. At the unfortunate detriment to all the people around me, but and so I didn't. What would happen is that became just kind of a thing, and so I left that night, and I was in summer school because I hadn't been going to school. Right, this is at that point in time. And I show up to summer school a week or two later. She had called me, the young woman that lived there, and I couldn't fully remember what I had done. Right. So that's where the story's a little bit foggy. But the brief parts that I remember is my friend calling me going to pick him up, and me telling him to tell the rest of our friends that were still there. This was 3 days later. So I had to leave because I had summer school. 3 days later, they were still there. And so were most of the other kids.
Yeah.
Just passed out. I mean, it looked like, if you've ever seen the movie Project X, I mean, fully just random people passed out everywhere. But so in the midst of that, I told them, okay, grab whatever you can and come out to my car so that we can leave, right? So they took BlackBerry, iPad, iPods, 2 computers, or actually no, 1 computer, a television. I mean, kind of whatever we could get our hands on. But what happened is there was this other group of young people that kind of caught on to it. We were doing that, so they did it too. And
competition.
They took, basically, they took all the stuff that we didn't take. And what I didn't know is her father worked for the federal government. The computer that the other group of young people stole was his computer, which contained sensitive information.
Whoa.
Now, we obviously didn't know that.
Yeah.
And they didn't either. But so it becomes a very big deal overnight, right? They're going, where is this computer? Where are these kids? How did this happen? So they go through the list of the kids at the party. And I'm me. So ding, 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 number 1 name. And I show up to summer school, and there's a couple officers waiting outside to come take me into questioning. So I go into questioning, I sit down, and I go, absolutely not. Under no circumstances would I ever do something so terrible. You have the totally wrong person. Let me tell you who you're looking for.
Oh my God, yeah.
Right? And so I tell them about the whole other group of kids and
nice.
And this person that I was actually kind of involved in that was selling copious amounts of mind-altering substances. And so I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I'm going to lie about this name because this name they probably know. Now, what I didn't know is that person actually, his father was pretty high up in the political scene there, and the DEA actually kicked in his house to an empty house.
Wow.
So, interesting. But the outcome of that was they took me in for questioning, and I said, no, under no circumstance did I ever do that. And 2 weeks later, I get arrested for false statements to an investigator, theft by taking, grand larceny. They pinned me with everything because turns out they have a picture of me outside of one of the pawn shops, which I didn't think about, holding one of the items, right?
Wow.
And my eyes are closed. I'm not even awake enough to tell you what was going on. I don't even fully remember going to the pawn shop, but they're blatantly like, it was you, and you lied in a federal investigation. So sorry about it, but you're going to jail. That's what's happening,
And
right?
where are you when you get arrested?
I am
dinner table?
No,
or?
but I'm in math class.
Oh.
And I had some stuff in my backpack, and they came over the intercom and said, is Mr. Stincer in class today? But it sounded a little bit different than usual because that happened quite often. And Mr. Thomas looked at me, right? And he was one of those teachers that I think really genuinely believed, and was ultimately right, that I was a good kid making bad decisions, caught up with the wrong people. And so he looked at me and kind of gave me this look, right? And then looked away, almost to go, if you need to do something, do it now. So I slid my bag over to one of my friends, and he pulled out everything that was in there. And then the principal of the school asked me to step out and got arrested on the spot. So, which is awesome. I don't know if that experience is really interesting, walking out of the school in handcuffs, with a bunch of other teenagers going, you're getting arrested. But I thought it was cool, right? So then I call my mother and I tell her, I'm a good kid making bad decisions, Mom, don't you know? Blah, blah, blah. The whole bit you would expect anybody to say. It wasn't me. And bless her, she it's not true, didn't fully buy it, but she bought it enough to come bail me out. So that night I go and continue to do what I was doing, right?
That
skip a beat.
experience didn't bother you?
Nothing. I mean, didn't even register as an important event.
Yeah.
I just went, oh, I was just in jail, and that was really boring. I don't want to be in jail. And there was some guy in jail trying to do the whole scare me thing, like, you're going to end up like me. And I was like, no, I'm not. Yeah, because I was in this world that I was totally going to be fine. Nothing bad could ever happen. And in the midst of that, you know, I'd had multiple other friends pass away from overdoses and car crashes, and watched my family slowly but surely be wrecked. You know, we actually moved to Augusta originally because my grandmother was there, and things started to go missing at her home, and it actually wasn't me, but it got all blamed on me, and I couldn't say anything. So this gap starts to happen between me and my family, and basically the way that it played out is I continued to do what I was doing, but just in kind of a violent way, in a very self-destructive way. I just that was it. I was a ticking time bomb, and the bomb had gone off. I had accepted that this is who I was, and this is what I was going to do, and I will burn bright and burn out. That's what I'm going to do. So I go off the serious deep end, which I don't know how you could go further, but at 17. But I run away, I come back, I start stealing more and more money from my family. I start stealing from my little brother's piggy bank. You know, he's 9. He's a 9-year-old little boy. I'm going in his room stealing his piggy bank because I want to be the guy that shows up at the party with the money and the drugs.
Wow.
Right. And then what happens is I was actually hanging out with 5 or 6 different groups of different kinds of people, right? So I hung out with the football guys, and I hung out with the kids who play video games, and I hung out with the kids that were involved in gangs, and I hung out with the kids because I could, you know, social chameleon into any community, right? And especially if you happen to have the drugs, everybody wants you around.
Yeah.
So what happened is all of them kind of realized at once, because what I would do is I would get the football players to be mad at the gangster guys and go, we should rob them, and then get the football players to rob the gangster guys. And then I'd go to the gangster guys and go, they robbed you. And then I'd get the gangster guys to go rob the football guy. And I would do that.
You're a good sales guy.
Yeah, that was the idea. And they all figured it out at the same time, in the same day.
Oh.
And basically, there was a small army of about 60 young people that really did not like me and went, meet us at this place at this time, and we're going to fight about it, basically. But like I said, at this point, I'm very self-destructive and just go, okay. And my plan was, I'll go to the golf club, see what happens, probably end up in jail, and then good, we're done.
So what happens?
So what happens is, the day that we're planning on do that, ironically, I end up having court. All right, and I step into the courtroom, and this is not my first time in the courtroom. And the judge sees me and is immediately pissed, because it's me.
Yeah.
Again, in the same room, the same stuff. And he goes, young man, I don't think I want to see you in this courtroom anymore. How does 2 years sound? Year in juvie and a year in big guy prison. We'll see how that goes.
No thanks.
Well, but here's where I was at. That was what I wanted to happen. I was ready to go.
Yeah.
I was ready to go. That made so much sense to me. I was going to be away from my family, who were awful. They would not leave me alone. They just wouldn't let me just live my life. Why do all these people keep trying to step in the way of what I'm trying to do? Don't they know?
Yeah.
And I don't know this for certain, but I think that was the route that the judge was going. And my mother stands up in the back of the room and asks for permission to speak. And she's standing there, you know, little 5'4", blonde hair, blue-eyed woman, and goes, my son, if he goes to jail, will continue to go to jail until he kills himself or somebody else. And that's not my son. That's a boy that's been doing drugs, that is not, he's sick. And if we just sent him to jail, if you sent him to jail today, there's no shot I'm getting my son back.
And the judge says...
And so it moved the judge. And the judge said, well, then what do you propose? And then, of course, my mother, being my mother, goes, these 17 different options, right? The different kinds of treatment, like a boot camp, wilderness therapy. And so what ends up happening is I end up going to I get sentenced to a mandatory boot camp that lasts from anywhere from 3 months to 2.5 years, kind of depending on what you do. And it's a bunch of ex-Marines, right? And they're I mean, they're ex-Marines. Okay, so they're a rough crowd.
Yeah.
And so I ended up going to this boot camp and was kind of sober by force, living in a teepee on the Alabama-Tennessee border, going hiking every day. And I was going to run away, but the closest town was about 30 miles. And I was far too frail and strung out to make it 30 miles, and I knew that. And then my secondary plan to get out was I was going to get bitten by a rattlesnake, because then they would have to send me home. So then I found out that that's not actually true. I was a ward of the state, so there's no going home. I'm here. And there's no way out except to do something. So then I go, okay, well, I'll just figure out what they want, and I'll tell them what they want. So then I figure out they want to hear about my trauma. They want to hear about why I'm so scared. They want to hear about why I'm doing all these things, right? So I make up all these BS stories, totally BS. I don't tell them anything real, but I just go, this awful thing, right? And do the whole fake cry and make up all this stuff. But there was one night I was in my teepee. Okay, it's just a weird thing to be in to begin with, but I'm in my teepee.
Alone? Yeah.
Not alone, no.
Oh.
Me and 12 other guys sleeping in a teepee, right? Like about a half a foot from each other in a giant circle.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a heater in the middle, but only the dominant guy got the heater, and I wasn't always the dominant guy in the room. There's some big guys. So it's quite cold. But I'm sitting there, and it's really cold. It's snowing outside, and I'm looking out at the stars, and I had this moment where I thought, what if I didn't do the things that I did? And it hit me all at once. I would have no problems.
Wow.
And that thought lasted about as long as it just took me to tell you about it. And directly after that, I went, that's stupid. But I had a moment. There's a little tiny moment of clarity, which was just enough to kind of seep through all of that stuff. And the only reason I had that moment is because at that point I had about 2 months without any sort of mind-altering substance in my body. And then the shortest amount of time you could be there is 90 days. I got out in 92. Took me 2 days to figure out what they wanted. And my plan was I got out and I was going to come home and just start doing exactly what I was doing. However, my family had a different plan. My mother had been going to some meetings with some other families that had young people that were in similar places. Now, the weird part about that, and my mom doesn't know this, so when she watches this will actually be quite funny, neither does my dad. But they went and sat down in this parent support group meeting for a support group for adolescents, similar, not like Full Circle, but to some degree similar. And directly after the meeting, my parents leave. The other parents stay behind. And they sat the staff down and said, you can't allow this young man to come to this program.
Wow.
Right. He will come here and he will ruin it for our kids.
When did you find that out?
I found that out probably 5 years ago.
Whoa.
5 years ago. But yeah, they sat the staff down. And luckily for me, the guy who was running it at that time, his name's AJ Cresswell. He's actually the executive director of Full Circle now. So I technically work for him. But the guy at that point goes, no, we're not turning that kid away. Out of your fear.
Good for him.
Right. Which is just huge. And if he hadn't done that, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Wow.
So, and then I get out and my parents had quite effectively, honestly, turned my house into basically a jail, right? So every lock on the door was a different padlock, not with a turn, with a key. Different keys for everyone.
Wow.
All the windows had screws in them with wax in the screws so that if I attempted to unscrew it, they would see, because I don't just have wax laying around. And the lock on my...
And how does that make you feel?
How does that make me feel? Annoyed.
Yeah.
At the time, I was just aggravated, right?
Yeah.
Like, why are you keeping me here? I just want to go. But I didn't want to go back to that place, right? And that was what was on the table. And the judge told me that if I get charged with anything else, there's no other shot and I'm going to jail. And at this point, I have enough time off of my adulterating substances to go, jail sounds not fun.
Yeah.
That was not fun when I was there. I don't really want to do that again. So I figured then I'm just going to do this until I don't have to. But then something quite miraculous happened. I met some other young people, right? And I'll never forget it. I walked into this room and there's some other young people, 17, 18, 19. And what was odd was a lot of them knew me. This kid brought up what I just said to you about that hole in his chest.
Mm-hmm.
And he went, I felt this way my whole life. And it was the weirdest experience I think that I've ever had still to this day. Because I thought, like, did they sit down before this and, like, talk about me to, like, get me to stick around? And so I asked the kid, I was like, what are you talking about? And he was like, that's just how I felt, man. I don't know. It didn't make any sense to me. And I couldn't figure out how to not feel that way. But I don't feel that way anymore. And I was like, what do you mean you don't feel that way anymore? Right, because now I'm interested.
Yeah. Excuse me.
And he started to tell me that basically he had to find something that was equally as exciting or as visceral as that lifestyle was that he was living before. But it couldn't be the same way. And that he actually wanted a relationship with his family, and he actually wanted friends and wanted connections. And these are all the things that I had thought, but never said to anybody.
Wow.
And then he told me,
had he been there before? It was an existing group?
It was an existing group, and he had been there for about 7 months.
Oh, wow.
Right? He had about 7 months sober. And he was 18. And that 18-year-old boy made more sense to me than any person I'd ever talked to in my entire life. He spoke the same language I did.
And his name is?
Brian.
And where is Brian today?
I honestly don't know. I think somewhere in California, I believe. But he changed my life. Completely and totally changed my life. Because then I went to a couple of the support group meetings, and, you know, heard other kids. And it's kind of the classic idea of you meet other people that have a similar experience. But the thing that was different for me was after being there for a little bit, I actually sat down with my family. And I did not stay sober. Right, I went out and got high again. And I will never forget it. I was sitting in a basement, this unfinished basement that I used to stay in all the time, with Coca-Cola cans and beer cans, imagine, spread out through the whole room, with these little holes that you step in to get around. And at some point, for about $40 and a gram of a mind-altering substance, I had bought a dog one night in a blackout. I don't know. But my dog was there that I could not take care of because I couldn't take care of myself.
Wow.
But my dog was there. And I'm sitting in this basement on this ripped up couch, which is not my scene, right? Like my father's a radiologist. My mom's a chemist by trade. Like,
No.
just not my scene, but it was my scene then. There's this guy, Fish, asleep in a chair, and the movie Pineapple Express was on DVD, but not playing. It was just the play screen where you hit play,
Yeah.
and I was just watching the same 3 scenes over and over again. And it hit me all at once while I'm sitting there high, and I went, this is it. This is all I'm ever going to do. I'm going to move from couch to couch to couch to couch, from basement to basement to basement to basement, avoiding every single person that cares about me in my entire life, like a coward.
Mm-hmm.
And I snapped. I don't know. I just snapped and was like, no, I can't do it. And I'd given myself this whole speech, right, about how this is who I am and this is what I do and there's no other way.
Left side talking to the right.
Fully, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, I don't know if you've ever seen Lord of the Rings, but the little Smeagol Gollum character, I mean, that's legitimately what it was like in my head. Like, just back and forth, this constant argument. And I could never get it to just shut up. But right after that, it just got really quiet.
Mm.
And I ended up basically calling my mother and going, I don't want to do this. I can't do it. But also kind of going, but I think I can. But I don't want to say that. And so I tell my mom I'm leaving, I'm going. Don't worry about it, like, whatever. And she goes, okay. Which was not the answer I was expecting.
Mm-hmm.
She goes, okay. I've been trying to tell you what to do for 5, almost 6 years, and you've never listened to me one time.
Mm.
So if you want to go do that, you can go do it. But do not call me.
Wow.
Do not text me. Don't call your brothers. Don't call your dad. And you better bring the car home or I report it stolen.
Wow. So
then I get really quiet on the phone and I hang up the phone. And since that day, I haven't used a mind-altering substance since that day.
Oh my God.
Mm-hmm. Since that day, which was almost 10 years ago.
Do you account for Pineapple Express? Do you credit that?
I'd sort of, right? That was a total piece of it. But really, what it was for the first time I realized that
Rinse and repeat.
Yeah, like kind of rinse and repeat. But it was this moment of clarity to go, the reason that I want to die so bad is that I hate the way that I'm living so much. But I didn't know there was another way to do it. I legitimately had no idea. Because I felt like no one ever told me.
Okay, so going back,
Okay.
you didn't know there was any different way of life?
Yeah. I legitimately thought that if I was going to have fun and if I was going to be fulfilled, it was going to revolve around using mind-altering substances, being promiscuous, being infamous, being the cool guy, right? I imagined myself as Johnny Depp from Blow, right? As a 17-year-old
yeah.
kid. But that's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to get a Netflix documentary, don't you know? For doing all these things, right? Because I never watched a Netflix documentary about this really nice person that's just so, they really did some great stuff. I was like, nice people just get stepped on.
Yeah. Okay, so you go home.
So I go home, and basically I
Turn the car in.
So here's what happens. I go home. I don't turn the car in.
Oh, okay.
But I have a moment where I go, every one of these teenagers that I've met, that all have very similar stories to me. Some of which I've robbed, some of which I've stole. I've really screwed them over in some way, shape, or form. A couple of them I had cussed out that I didn't remember doing. And this is all prior to me attending some of the support group meetings. But they all seemed to really care about me. And I didn't have anything that I could give them. I didn't have any money. I didn't have any, I had nothing. But they would still pick up the phone and they would still talk to me. And they still wanted to hear about my life. And they still wanted to get some understanding of what was going on with me. And all of them would talk about honesty. All of them would talk about being willing to do things to change, actually. Not just talk about it, but actually do it. And I think there's very few people on the planet that are more blunt than teenagers, at least with other teenagers. And so they were just very real with me. And I met this young man and this young woman, this little girl named Kinsey. I actually don't know where she is today, but this little girl named Kinsey, and she had this little cross tattoo on the back of her neck, and she was a little 16-year-old girl with a really bad drug problem, and she was all alone in the world, is what it seemed like, and she was so scared, and I wanted her to not be so scared, and it was the weirdest feeling because I cared. Which at first I was like, like, why do I care about what happens? Like, I don't want to care about what happens to you. Like, but I did. I cared. I really cared about what happened to this girl. But I didn't know what to do to help. And somebody told me, well, you can't give away something you don't have.
Wow.
And I went, okay, so what do I do? And they were like, you have to change, or everything you're saying is a moot point. You can't say anything. You're just a faithless preacher.
So somebody called you out on your bullshit.
Basically,
yeah.
And really, I started to take some action. I started being really honest. I started allowing people to hold me accountable.
Who did you?
Other teenagers.
Oh.
Pick XYZ teenager. I mean, really, there's this kid that was nicknamed Rambo because he had a giant scar on his forehead. Brian. This girl named Delphine, this girl named Maddie. I still know her. She's a lawyer out in Hawaii now. But there's a bunch of people, a bunch of these other young people, about 12 to 15 of them. And we would go on road trips to the beach and watch the sunrise. And we would go and play poker at somebody's house and hang out. We would tell stories about what happened to us and things we had been through and laugh about it. Which was weird because every time I had ever told anyone my story, that prior to now, they would kind of look at me like, "What is wrong with you?"
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Like, what are you doing? You're a child. Please stop doing what you're doing. But they really got it. And they thought it was funny. I would talk about sitting in my room crying by myself for a couple hours, and they go, "Oh, I did that." But it was just normal.
Yeah.
And so for the first time that I could remember, I felt abnormally normal. I just felt like I totally fit in. And I wasn't faking it, and I wasn't trying to be cool. I was just being me at 18 years old. And so, like I said, I started trying to help that little girl and started trying to help this other kid named Mike. And I realized I was pretty good at talking to them about them. Horrible when it comes to myself. Like seeing myself clearly,
Yeah.
I mean, it's impossible.
Buck to pan.
Yes, but I could do that all day.
Yeah.
And so as I started to do that, I kind of fell in love with it. And fell in love with being able to go, okay, I'm going to take this experience that most people would deem absolutely unusable and use it. Because I can relate to young people in a way that most people can't. I get that. I get the hole in your chest. It feels like the wind could blow through. That nobody, you felt like nobody has ever said to you. I get thinking about who would show up to your funeral if you killed yourself and what photo would they use.
Okay.
What song would they play? I spent hours thinking about that, which is why. And it really did. I just started doing that, and then that program that I was in shut down. And then a lot of the kids that I had gotten close with went back out and started using drugs and alcohol, whatever.
Right.
And then, because they did, they wanted to. They didn't want to continue to do it because it's
A lot of work.
it's not easy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And really, it's not easy to be honest. And they decided to go do that, which that's totally up to them and their choice. But it left me in a really peculiar situation because that was the first time in my life that I experienced you did the right thing and people are mad at you about it, which was really odd. Because then they left and all started kind of getting high together and going, Ben's an asshole, whatever thing. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, wait, I thought we were friends. Like, I thought we were friends. I thought I was trying to help. And they just didn't want anything to do with me. And so at that point, I was in college. I was going to college for business management. And I was sitting in class, and I was listening to this teacher talk. He was in a psychology class. And he started talking about addiction and young people.
I know that subject.
Right? But what he said made me so mad.
Oh.
Made me so mad. Because he went, well, they can't, young people will use mind-altering substances, but they can't really develop a problem until they've reached a certain age.
Wow.
To which I'm like, excuse me, sir. Let me tell you a couple things really quickly.
Did you honestly raise your?
I almost did, and then I got up and I walked out, and I did not go back to college.
Wow.
I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and basically tried to get involved in something similar to enthusiastic recovery-ish, right? But I was very skeptical of it. There's all these weird, it's just, people get angry at people, right? And so, but in my head, right, being a 20, or I was 19 at the time, 19, 20-year-old, I really was like, I'm going to do something. I don't know why, but I'm going to do something because I'm not going to do nothing. I'm not living in my head kind of on borrowed time at this point for no reason. I'm going to do something with it.
Okay.
And so I went through a training program out there, which was cool. But then I moved out to Phoenix and worked at an inpatient in Phoenix, Arizona, and at an intensive outpatient in Phoenix, Arizona, both with young people.
With no college degree.
No college degree. I was just a behavioral health technician.
Well, okay.
I was the guy that gave you a hug. Right?
Good job.
And said, I love you, and I really hope that you stop doing what you're doing. And then I started volunteering at Full Circle, which was just this little, 25 kids. And there was this kid there. His name was Christian. And if you saw him right now, you'd think I have a clone. Long hair, same facial structure. He was 17. I mean,
everybody has a twin, honey.
Yeah, I mean, really. and so, but I started hanging out with him a lot, and I absolutely fell in love with Full Circle because it was, at its base, it was just families coming together with other families, going, what do we do? And then other young people coming together with other young people. And then the staff's job was just to keep the gate. And if a kid didn't actually want to be there, going, you can't be here.
Wow.
And being there to listen to him and try and understand. And I fell in love with it head over heels. And then the flip side of that was, and still to this day, there's this low grade thing in the back of my head that goes, if I stop helping, does the rest of that stuff come back?
Oh my.
And in my experience, it does.
Okay, so let's go back. So teenagers, like definitely difficult to be a teenager. Your
Yes.
hormones, you don't know what to do, fit in. Do they call that depression today?
It depends. Because a lot of the times teenagers don't have the words to put on.
Yeah.
But they'll see that on social media and they'll go, I'm depressed. I'm anxious. Because of course they will. You're a teenager. You're trying to figure out who you are. You're trying to figure out how to identify yourself. And you feel inadequate all the time.
Yeah.
And it's because when I was a teenager, and every teenager on the planet, we were inadequate. I didn't know how to drive. I didn't know how to go to school. I didn't know how to have a job. I didn't know how to do laundry. Like, I didn't know how to live, right? Like, I knew how to exist and live in this wonderful place where my rent was paid and there was magical reappearing cabinets of food that I could just eat as much as I want. So I had no actual conception of that. So I'm walking around inadequate 24/7, looking for a reason that I feel the way that I feel.
That's an interesting word, inadequate.
Yes. And
Is that a commonality?
very much so. A lot of the times, and when I talk with young people about that, they go, I am. But it's okay. You're supposed to be. If you just became 15 and understood the whole world, what's the point of living past that? You're just repeating the same stuff. But you get to go through life and experience these things. And a lot of the times, at least from my own personal experience, being an adolescent or being a teenager is weird because it's grow up and be a kid. You act like too much of a kid. You act like too much of an adult. There's no perfect thing. And it's this weird time period in life that everybody just tries to rush people through. Just got to get them out of high school.
Okay, can I ask you an honest question?
Absolutely.
Did your parents miss a sign?
No. No, they didn't. Because there was no way for them to know.
It feels like, in general,
Yeah.
like you didn't know who to talk to, right?
At some point.
Yeah.
But where it began was I didn't want to.
Ah, okay.
I didn't want to. Because once I wanted to, I knew right where to go. Right? I went to my mom and I went to my dad and I was honest with them. As soon as I wanted to. But for me to get to a place where I wanted to,
It's a long time.
it took what it took, right? And it's different with young people because they have all the reason in the world to not. They have college ahead of them. They have the social pressure. They have the social acceptability.
Yeah.
They have the fact that they become cool overnight. And who doesn't want to be liked and loved and be the coolest person they know? Especially teenagers. And they'll do whatever they can to do so.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Why do you have that fear?
Why do I have that fear? Because it was my experience. And that feeling that I was talking about earlier, that
The whole?
the whole, but the feeling of being alone. I was actually watching one of your other interviews with, I believe his name, Peter Schaefer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sheehan.
Or Peter Sheehan.
Yeah.
And one of the things he was talking about resonated with me because it was interesting when he was talking about, a lot of the reason that I've become so successful is when I was a child, I was the middle kid trying to find attention. But what's interesting about my story is I don't necessarily have a childhood thing like that. I created these own problems within my own life due to the fact that I wasn't honest. So I ended up with a similar outcome
Yeah.
through my own actions because of what I did. I decided to start smoking pot. I totally fell in love with it. I decided to rob my friends. I decided to hit my friends. I decided to do all of those things. And in the end, I went, why is my life so awful? Right? But I'm living in this world without consequence, just in denial because I couldn't feel anything. And so it did. It got to a point where once I started to get sober, it became abundantly clear to me that if I stop and allow myself to really be self-centered, which doesn't mean I can't stop and relax and be calm. I absolutely can do that. I do it all the time. But if I stop and I allow myself to go, the world doesn't treat me right. To fall
Woe
into
is me. Yeah.
woe is me, right? Or big shotism. Let me tell you about how wonderful I fall into that. Both sides are equally dangerous for me. Because as soon as I do that, I become apart immediately from everybody. And then once I start to feel alone, slowly but surely, I will make myself alone. I've watched myself do it hundreds of times over the last 10 years. And then the nice thing is I have enough awareness and enough tools and enough...
You learned about yourself.
I learned about myself to be able to go, wait, redirect.
Yeah.
And so far, the odd thing has been that as long as I've been willing to redirect and just kind of do the next indicated thing.
So far?
So far. I don't know. It could change tomorrow. right? We could have this interview and then it all goes downhill. And I hope not.
Please don't.
But it could, because
Shit happens.
shit happens. But really, I just every single day just try and do the next indicated thing, the next right thing. Past that, I really don't know. And I'll come up with all these reasons as to why I do know. And let me tell you hundreds of reasons why. Let me tell you about the studies and the statistics behind it. Blah, blah, blah.
It's you.
But really, I have no idea. Like, it's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
me, just kind of doing stuff.
So these kids, let's talk about full circle. Full circle. Mom and dad bring the kid.
Sometimes.
So, and mom and dad say, oh my God, take my problem? I don't know how to deal with it.
Usually, no. Usually, it's usually one kid comes to full circle, right? And decides, oh, wait, maybe this could be cool. Maybe if this is what getting sober looks like, I could pull it off.
Okay, so the kid gets there through a friend?
Through a friend, through social media, they saw something on Snapchat. They posted something about how sad they were. Someone said, hey, you should come here.
Okay.
Right? And then they come to their first meeting. Right? And in their very first meeting, one of the staff facilitates what is called a newcomers meeting, where they explain the program and they walk them through why honesty is so important, and they walk them through their experiences being a teenager and being honest with their parents. And it's almost like every kid's looking for the exact same answer. Why? What's the point of me being honest with my mom and dad? They won't get it. And then you walk them through, no, your mom and dad actually want to get it. You've been lying to them for years. There's no way they can. And if you're just pissed at them because you feel like they don't understand you, it's because they don't.
Wow.
Because they're just having to guess over and over.
Yeah.
And if you don't tell them, they can't know. Nobody can read anybody's mind. It doesn't make sense. So, and then we go, if you want to continue to come here, you have to get your parents to call up here for an
Wow.
appointment. And they will. And sometimes they'll lie and go, it's a youth group, or they'll go, it's a treatment center, like, which we're neither, right? But
What do you call yourself?
just a support group.
Okay.
We don't do any therapy. We don't do anything like that. We refer out into the community for that.
So why do you have to get permission from a parent?
Because that's what brings a family together.
Ah.
Technically, if they're of the age of 18, I don't have to do anything. But we won't let them be in the program if their parents will not come.
Will not come.
If they will not come, if they won't tell their parents. Absolutely. Because the point of it is family. And yes, it's about young people, but it's also about the parents.
So I have personal experience. So from my point of view, from what I see, it's a very loving parent that is asking for help.
Yes. But a lot of the times they don't know where to look.
Yeah.
Or they've exhausted financial resources, they've gone
Yeah.
to treatment, they've gone to this, they've gone to that, or they have no idea. Usually it's one side or the other. They don't even know.
Okay, so how do I help you? Because I have seen you have done personal experience, beautiful things, right? It's as a mother, I don't want to ever see another mother cry
Yes.
over their kid.
Yes.
So how do I help you?
Honestly, I think doing what you're doing.
Okay, can I help you raise money? Can I help you find a building?
Oh yeah, if you know how to
I'm
raise
not
money,
God,
that's not my
okay.
work. But if you know how to do that, that would be super helpful. And we actually lucked into this building, the one we have now. We got a 7,500 square foot building that the support group calls it a mullet. So the front's business, the back's party. But the front is offices where we'll do individual appointments with families and sit down and talk with them. Because like you were just saying, like being a parent, they love their kids.
Yeah.
They might not like what they're doing, but they love their kids. And it is, and not my personal experience, I'm not arrogant enough to tell you I know what it's like to be a mom or a dad. I just don't. I haven't done that yet. But they talk to people about it, and they get the world's most inane solutions. What didn't you tell them not to? Which is, oh no, yeah, I told my kid to rob me. What do you do? Take their door off the hinges, ground them, unground them, be harder on them, be softer on them. And everyone's parents have an opinion on what they should be doing. So it's this weird thing where parents are just alone. They talk to their parents about it, they're condemned. They talk to their friends and they go, well, let me tell you about how Billy's going to Harvard on a full ride.
Yeah,
and they're
yeah.
going, I'm trying to make sure my son didn't creep out the back window. So thank you very much for making me laugh.
So is it also embarrassment?
Some of it's embarrassment. Some of it's very strangely socially
Yeah.
not talked about.
Yep.
And a lot of people still lean on the side of, teenagers can't have a problem. There's all kinds of stuff. But in my personal experience, Denver full circle, it opened in my truck.
Good place to start.
Yep. I met with families in my truck. Crying mom sitting in the passenger seat. And a kid. And we would sit in my truck. And we'd just talk. And then it went from 1 kid to 7 kids. Luckily, and very graciously, Melissa Mouton allowed us to use 5280 High School after hours. So we would go there and do meetings. And I went from 7 kids to 25 kids. Then I couldn't meet with them just in my truck anymore. And we started meeting at a Starbucks. Off of downtown, right off Broadway. And I'd meet them at the Starbucks and we'd go get sushi and hang out. And so there'd be, if you happened to be at Starbucks at that point in time, you probably would have been like, what's happening? Because there's just 25 teenagers walking around this parking lot,
Yeah.
Some of them looking more rough than others. And then it went from 25 to 35. And then by the grace of Shay, actually, I was on the phone with her and she said the same thing that you just said to me. How can I help? And I went, I don't really even know what we're doing here. It's just kind of happening. So anything you can do to help. And I told her that we were looking for a building, and she said, Ben, I have that building.
Yeah.
And then we got to move in there. And then it went from 40 kids to 75 overnight in COVID, doubled in size.
Okay, so why do you think all these kids are flocking?
Because it's kids talking to kids.
And they're talking?
Oh, yeah. Oh, they're talking to each other, holding
Yeah.
each other accountable. They see that each other are happy. They see that they're doing things with their lives. They see that they have relationships with their families. And kids genuinely, a lot of the times when I meet them, go, I hate my parents. But they don't mean it.
Yeah.
They just don't know how else to say it. They don't have the words to put on it. And so they go, I'm depressed, I'm anxious. And some of them really are. Some of them really are depressed and really are anxious. But a lot of the times, if they can stop using mind-altering substances and get their head screwed on a little bit more right, and feel like they're supported, their parents are coming to meetings, and they're fully involved. Their parents now, they feel like their parents get it. I have kids confronting their parents about coming to parent meetings.
Wow.
16-year-olds going, Mom and Dad, I want you to come to the parent meeting. You need to talk to some other parents because you guys look alone.
Is that a show, like a sign that a parent comes, like, to Johnny?
Yes.
And the parents?
It's mostly to the kid. You'll watch every kid and they'll never say it. But if you ever come stop by Full Circle, their meeting usually gets out before the parents. And they'll come walk by. And they won't do it, obviously. But they'll just peek in through the window to see if their mom or dad is there. And then walk away really quickly. But they just want to know.
Yeah.
Because they go, for their perspective, they
want to be loved.
They want to be loved, and they want to feel like they didn't just mess it up beyond repair, And so we have kids from kids that lived on the street and were doing heroin, to a kid that smoked pot 3 times, to a kid that has never done any mind-altering substance and struggled with pornography. He's 13. He's the man. He's awesome. And his mentor is 16. And that kid and him talk a lot about how he can be a better version of himself. How can he push himself to grow? And, a lot of the young men will talk about, what kind of man do I want to be? And just get into stuff like that they don't get into.
So your staff, do they have a similar story?
Every single one of them.
Because it's relatable.
Yes. Yeah, our office manager, Jacqueline Paget, she's currently working full-time with Full Circle and going to the University of Pennsylvania online, Ivy League school. And then we have Sam Wilson, who is from Colorado locally, and he's the senior staff. And he usually talks with the younger people, the 13 to 17. And he meets with the families individually and facilitates the support group meetings. And then Drew, who's one of our younger staff, he's 19, but he runs the quote-unquote shop, right? So he's kind of the cruise director. He does all the behind-the-scenes stuff. He helps plan those events. He goes and buys all the items for the coffee bar in the back that the support group runs. And he kind of gets to be the support group's just buddy.
So what are you going to be when you grow up?
I don't know. I guess we're gonna see, but I can tell
Like
you
this.
what.
Woo. Yeah.
Well, I don't plan on stopping, and I've done a lot and not a lot of time, and a lot of that I would credit to the beautiful thing about young people, like I was saying earlier, is they're to the point. And one of the things they've said to me recently is, "Why aren't there more? Why aren't there just more kids here? Why aren't there more?" Because they don't know, right? And the thing I have to own, which I'll own with you right here, is I wasn't doing stuff like this. I wasn't doing community stuff and partially out of the fact that there was just so many people coming to the program, but partially out of my own fear. Out of my own fear that either A, someone would misunderstand it, or B, someone would use my story against me, which someone may, but whatever. Or C, that it wouldn't have an impact.
Wow.
And you know who pointed that out to me?
Who?
17-year-old kid in the support group.
He said what?
He said, "You're not doing it because you're scared."
Wow.
Right, and then I'm the program director, okay? And he's a 17-year-old boy. and from the mouths of babes is one of the most real things I've ever heard.
So in my eyes, it takes courage to tell your story.
Thank you.
Hence the power of a voice, because if you can't tell it, people will also hide their problems.
Yes,
And we all have them.
we do. We do.
Okay, what is your legacy going to be when you're 40?
I don't know.
Oh, you know. Come on.
I honestly think, at least my hope.
You're one. You're one.
My want is truly that the fingerprints I left behind meant something. That I left more than I took out, or at least got even.
Even.
Mm-hmm.
Your mom thinks you have come even, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And if you can help one kid, you've done your job, because you're helping one kid to help another kid.
Exactly, and that's the hope.
Yeah.
But
That's a dream, and that it's your reality. Look how well you've done.
I really am a firm believer that if you give teenagers an actual direction and give them some power over it, they'll do the right thing.
The power. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Do you have a story to share? I'd love to hear from you. Please visit LoriCorken.com. There you will find more stories like the one you heard today with our series, The Power of a Voice.